back to another episode of Mind Split Cafe. My man Matt, what's going on?
Hey, Chris, how are you, man? I'm excited about our guest this week. Super
Yeah,
stoked.
I'm excited about the guest, but tomorrow's Thanksgiving, so I'm a little more excited about that. But today we have Dr. Jessica George and Dr. Natasha Benetti. Did I say that correct?
Benatti.
Benatti,
Benatti.
I'm sorry. All right. Well, do you guys want to kind of introduce yourselves and maybe give the listeners a little sample of what we'll be going over today?
I always have Dr. Benatti go first, and then I add color.
Sure. This is what we've been doing for a couple of years now. So I am Dr. Natasha Benatti, as Chris mentioned. I am a clinical psychologist focusing on trauma, and we are going to be talking about trauma-informed care today. So don't be deceived by the name just quite yet. We have a little
Okay.
bit of surprises for you there.
I'm already
Um,
getting a little anxiety, like trauma-informed care. Like, I don't
yeah.
know exactly what that means, but I'm sure you're going to break it down for us. So I'm
We
excited.
we will. We'll break it down for you all. And I'm here with my partner, Dr. Jessica George, today.
Yes, that's me. And I'm also,
Hello.
hi, a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma. And yes, it's an unfortunate named concept for what it is. So you'll see, yeah, trauma is a word that's used in a lot of different ways, but we will provide the context, which is a part of trauma-informed care, by the way.
Now, before we dive into trauma-informed care, you hold on one second. Hold on.
We'll be able to
Oh,
cut
the
this part out.
I, yeah, hold on. The Amazon guy just knocked on the door. Hold on one second. I'm
And
just
his little
pause.
dog's going crazy.
Okay, so before we dive into trauma-informed care and what exactly it is, because I want to ask you that question. You guys, y'all work together, y'all have a clinic together, correct? Plug the clinic. Where exactly are you located? How can people find you? And then I really want to dive into this trauma-informed care.
Mhm. Yeah, so we are partners along with our third partner, Dr. Jessica Clement, at a group practice called TellaPsychology. And so the
Okay.
name is a little bit of a play as well in terms of what we do. So we are based out of Dallas, Texas, but we provide services across the entire state of Texas and also in actually 42 other states because our license provides us that option as well. So we partnered recently this year, earlier this year, actually. Just out of working together, knowing each other and knowing our philosophies and knowing what we wanted to stand for in terms of psychotherapy, psychology, and creating
Mm-hmm.
our practice. And so the three of us are psychologists who believe in trauma-informed care, who believe in holistic care, as well as evidence-based care. So those are the big things that we work on and the things that we like to say when we are providing some information of our practice.
I love it. I love it. I love that. I love that you guys. I'm sure you're all friends, and that's how it kind of evolved into a practice. But
Mhm.
um, I I I love that. So, what is? I guess I'll throw this question to Jessica. What is trauma informed care?
Okay, so are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so it is not a treatment. That's the most important thing. People get confused and they think, oh, it's a trauma treatment. No, it's a
Mhm.
framework of looking at the world and people and why they behave the way that they do. So it's kind of provides a explanation that is not based on blaming people or saying what is wrong with people. So the tagline of trauma informed care really, if you were going to go to any talk on it, would be it's a change from what's wrong with you to what happened to you.
Hmm. What's
Okay.
wrong with you
Mhm.
to what happened to you? Okay. All right.
So what is that? How do you take that? What does
How
that
do
sound
I
like?
interpret it? Okay,
Yeah.
so like um say for instance, I mean, I'm married. We, like any married couple, we have fights. Usually it's my fault, right? So, I mean, I usually it's not, but usually it is, right? And so the way I interpret is I get that. What's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Or what
Mhm.
have you?
Yeah.
The question could be posed like, what happened to you? Like,
Yeah.
what happened to you to make that decision or do X, Y, and Z? Am I kind of on topic?
Absolutely.
Am I too far
No,
left, too
yeah,
far
because
right? Like I've
we
got it, right?
you've got it. Yeah, like we in psychology have focused so much on the problems with people and their symptoms and all the diagnosis and really making a person potentially feel pretty bad and feel like there's something damaged about them or wrong
Yeah.
with them when trauma informed care psychology says there has been things that have happened to you, maybe to the point of being traumatic and scary and threatening to your life, or kind of like we call them little t traumas, just the little difficulties that we all have. And that affects your nervous system, which impacts how you're going to react to threats like your wife yelling at you or, things like that. Not to,
Yeah.
no offense to your wife. But
No, no,
brought
not
it
at
up.
all. No, no. Like I said, it's usually not my fault, but it usually is.
Mhm.
So that makes sense, right?
Yeah. So
So,
to put it in very, very simple, a very simple example here, right? So today I'm driving home and I get cut off by this car, right?
okay.
And so my initial instinct, without my psychologist hat on, without trauma informed care hat on, is to say, oh my gosh, what is wrong with this person? Why would they cut me off?
Yeah.
Right. And
That's
so
what you said? Like in your mind, that's what you said? Because mine is a lot dirtier when someone cuts me off on a
well,
one-way
I'm
street. But
editing for podcast purposes, because what's in my mind is like, what is going on here? Right? Using some expletives with that. But when we put the trauma informed care lens on it, it becomes a little bit more, wow, what could be happening to this person that they just cut me off and then sped off, right?
yeah,
So it gives you a lens to have a little bit more compassion, maybe a little bit more understanding and empathy too.
I like that compassionate lens. Yes.
So what does kind of like a treatment plan for something like this look like?
So, like we mentioned, trauma informed care is not a treatment, right? It is not a treatment modality. It is a shift of how we are viewing people, right? It's a framework of how we understand what people are like and their behaviors and who they are as people, right? So we're not necessarily talking about one specific treatment. We're talking a whole like paradigm shift.
So yeah, so it's more there's no treatment for it. It's just more of step out of how you view it and try and put yourself in the eyes of that person that's doing whatever, cutting you off, or like Matt not doing the dishes or whatever, right? You're trying to just say, kind of step out of yourself and shift the lens to where you can see where they're coming from, correct?
Yeah, and you can implement trauma informed care in like an ice cream store. It doesn't even have to be therapy, right? You can create whatever organization or place, or a podcast can be trauma informed, right? So, one of the basic tenets of core principles is safety.
Okay.
You can't you can't be trauma informed without having safety. And so, for example, before this podcast, y'all were saying, hey, here's what to expect. This is how it's going to go. And so that put us in a safe frame of mind so that we're
Sure.
not just going to be like, what is going to happen in this, right? You informed us because maybe something happened to me when I was younger and I had to do some kind of speaking thing and it was humiliating and embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
So it could be triggered by me having to be on a podcast, but since you laid such a nice groundwork
Thank
for
you.
safety,
Yeah.
we are feeling okay.
Well,
No
I
triggers.
yeah, well, I love that explanation because had I never realized that a potential guest, whether I know you used an example for yourself, but I never realized, it never dawned on me that a guest, whether it be previously or maybe in the future, they might have had some sort of public speaking fear. Because I mean, Chris and I do it all the time, right? So I take it for granted that everybody's going to feel comfortable and safe doing this platform, right? And the example you just said is like, you could have had some sort of traumatic experience in the 6th grade when when you just fell flat on your face at the at the talent show or
The
something.
spelling bee. I actually
Yeah,
have
the
one of
spelling
those,
bee or
yeah.
something, where now you have a real fear of public speaking. And it just never dawned on me that that could be the case. So if you shift that perspective and have more of that compassionate lens, then you're practicing trauma informed care, correct?
Yeah. So let me ask you guys
All
a
right, I'm
question.
the fourth partner. I'm the fourth partner.
You're the
Like,
fourth.
let me know I'm in. I'm in.
Great. So let me ask you guys a question. I'm gonna turn
Okay,
things
let's
around a
do
little
it.
bit.
Let's shift.
All right.
So do you all know what the percentage of people that have had at least one traumatic event in the United States is?
I would say
I'd say it's
100%.
like, yeah, for
They're really
sure.
good. They're good.
I was gonna say 100%. And while you were like asking, when you were kind of introducing yourself and telling me what trauma informed care was, I'm trying to think, have I ever had a traumatic like event? And I can think of one or two. And I could share that another day,
But
but
we have a way that you can determine if it's trauma or not.
okay, yes, please. Let's dive into that. Yes,
because
go
this
ahead.
is a simple thing to remember. It's 3 E's.
It's like a litmus test, right? You're
Yes.
gonna kind of, okay, all right, 3
So
E's.
the first one is event. So something has to have happened that
Okay.
was scary, threatening, something distressing had to happen, right?
Okay,
The trauma
check.
can't happen. Okay, so the event happened. So that's E. The second one is experience. The person has to experience the event as traumatic.
Okay, like firsthand, or just be like in the room, or like when you say experience, it has to happen to you, or can you
Your
be a witness?
your subjective experience. So even
Okay.
it could be, the
witness.
event could be somebody else was in a car wreck, but it's your loved one and you experience it as traumatic, even though you weren't in it. Yeah.
I see. Okay. All right. So check. All right.
Check. Okay. And then the last E is effects. So there has to be some kind of lasting impact on any domain in your life, spiritual, emotional, behavioral, blah, 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 social, that can either happen after the event or could be delayed. So it doesn't have to happen after, but there has to be some kind of impact.
That's kind of like the when you say impact, yes, the event had an impact on my life because it made me more conscious and aware of my surroundings and where, like, it kind of raises hairs on the back of my neck if I'm ever in a situation like that again. I know, like, I get that feeling like, whoa, no, this is too close for comfort. I got to get out of here, right? And so, and this event happened to me when I was maybe 15, 16 years old, right? And it was traumatic for me. It was shocking, right? And so
I think
yeah, so I've
it
had
passed the
trauma.
3 E's. Yeah. And Dr. Benatti can explain the hair on your neck and what.
Yeah, please, because I try to go to get a haircut and I tell the lady to cut the hair all the time, right? But
Yeah.
go
Well,
ahead.
so I wanted to say something before that, just because, sometimes we talk about trauma and we think about these big trauma events. And Dr. George mentioned the little T traumas that we also have, which is like life difficulties, right? Going through a divorce, moving to a different place, if you're a kid, switching schools abruptly, or things like that.
These are all traumas.
They can be, right? It depends on the person's experience of it, but they're all adversarial events, right? We can call them that. And we can talk a little bit about adverse childhood experiences in a minute too.
I like that. The adversarial events. I like that better because when I hear the word trauma, I think of like
something massive.
Massive, like
Yeah.
ER, like walking through, George Clooney's got his hand in somebody's chest cavity, like something, like crazy.
Yeah.
That's when I hear trauma, I think of
Big
like next level,
Mhm. Yeah.
but
And
you're saying it could
what
be
trauma,
a move from a different state or whatever. It could be something, a little T, like you said, right?
yeah. So for example, I immigrated to the United States when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
Right. So that was something that big, right?
Oh yeah.
That happened in my life. Will I call it traumatic? Not necessarily, right? But it
For
changed.
that 10-year-old self, it was.
It was a big change,
Yeah.
and it had its effects, and it
Yeah.
changed things for me probably significantly. I have no idea what it would have been if I didn't move.
Well, you're about to get married, so you met your husband, and now so there you go. And
Right.
you
So
got
here
great
we go, another big
partners.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you got business partners. Like
Too.
you coming over at 10 years old, kind of set your life up.
Well, that
Yeah.
is also, I'm glad you say that, because trauma-informed care is a strength-based framework. So we look for things like that. We look for ways that people grow from their trauma.
From the little T or from the trauma itself,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of like a glass half full kind of perspective, right? Like you could look at it, that the glass is empty, half empty, or you could look at it half full. Like when you said that you came over at 10 and I said, well, you met your your two business partners and you're about to get married and you met your husband. I'm assuming you met him in the States, right? And so
Mhm. Right.
those two things, that traumatic event when you were 10, help set your life up to where it is now, where you're professional with your friends and you've got a great thriving practice and you're
Absolutely.
about to
Mhm.
sign your life away. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm married, so I make a joke like that, but
Well,
yeah.
one thing I've seen this on Twitter and I always save the little meme thing is, you know, there's this thing like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that is not our trauma informed perspective, because
Okay.
it really does a lot of damage to your development and to and some people really suffer. So we don't want to minimize,
What
the
they're going through.
right.
So
Right.
how do you assess the long-term impact of trauma? Was that not a good question?
Are you going to go, or do you want me to
I
go?
mean, there you can go if you like.
Well, so the 30, right? The effects of trauma in order for it to be trauma. I think there are so many facets, right? So when we're thinking about clusters of symptoms, or we're thinking about diagnosing, we can use several different things. And so in order for us to measure where someone is at, right, or to gauge where they are and their level of functioning, we're going to look at like how things were before
Okay.
the event happened and how things are right now, right? And we're going to look at, is this person experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, even post-traumatic stress disorder, of course, which is the big one related to trauma, right? But what we also like to teach when we do trainings on trauma informed care is that trauma symptoms are not just the PTSD cluster symptoms, like having nightmares, flashbacks, recurrent
Interesting.
intrusive thoughts, and things like that. Symptoms can show up in many, many different ways. It can affect your concentration, your appetite, your sleep, of course, your
Sex
mood,
drive.
sex drive, of course. Yeah. um and also your relationships, right? So we really want to get a good understanding, and when we start seeing people who have a host of these clusters of symptoms, then we start to kind of consider trauma as a potential, right? Because a lot of the time people that are coming to us, they're not coming in and saying, oh, I have trauma. Right?
Yeah.
help me. A lot of the time
Yeah.
they're like, I can't sleep at night, or I'm
Yeah.
having a really hard time in my relationships, like at work, right? I
And it's
can't.
kind of up to you guys to kind of peel back the layers of the onion to figure out what is really going on, right?
Yeah. So we got to ask those questions and really get targeted on, I wonder what's going on here. I wonder what happened here, right? That's
Oh,
always
well,
kind of
I'm so glad you asked. We can do this every week for an hour. Let's do it. So
that's how we function.
That's how Matt gets his treatment in his
that's
therapy.
how since I've been a co-host of this podcast, I think I've self-diagnosed myself every week. It's like, hey, you know what? I could see myself in that. I probably got trauma. I'm probably high functioning depressed. Like there's so many things
Mhm.
so I kid, but I'm not playing. I probably am self-diagnosing myself. So, but I'm learning so much,
Yeah, that's what
I
happens to
really
all
am.
of us when we're in our abnormal psychology class. When you're learning about it, you're just like, oh my gosh, that's me,
That's me.
or that's my family member.
You
Yes.
start to see a
Mhm.
little bit of it in yourself or people around you.
Yeah.
So
So tomorrow.
let me ask you this. So you see these patients, right? Respectfully, you've got your client list or whatever. How do you escape? I mean, you guys are clinical psychologists, right? Like, how do you step away from because everybody that comes to you has problems, I'm
Mhm.
assuming, right? Like, how do you say, all right, it's 5:30, I'm done, like I'm going to go, like what do you do to just step away and just kind of like to not be a
Check the
clinical
trauma at the door.
psychologist? How do you not take your work home?
And this is our second favorite topic, self-regulation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't think I ever step away, because the magic to me of trauma-informed care is that it is helping me as well, because trauma-informed care is not only about the patient, it's about the clinician,
Okay.
because we are experiencing vicarious trauma because we're listening to all that stuff. But
Yeah.
are the same mechanisms that are impacting our patients are impacting us, meaning our nervous system is activated in fight flight because we're
Yep.
trying to help the people. And so the same thing we talk to our patients about is regulating our nervous system. So we do the same things that we tell everyone else to, mindfulness, taking breaths. We do something called the butterfly hug, just a lot of little things we can do so that we can, at the end of session, calm our nervous system.
I'm curious. What is so it's just that?
Yeah,
Yeah, so
we'll teach you guys at the end if you want
Okay.
to.
yeah,
It's like
Yeah, that's interesting.
our little giveaway.
yes. So it's our secret handshake. So yeah, I mean, that's what I do. I do the same kind of things that I recommend.
Yeah. Yeah. I think self-care is a word that gets thrown around a lot, right? And people say it all the time. Oh, remember your self-care, remember your self-care, right? And we're historically really bad at self-care. Psychologists are probably some of the worst people to engage in self-care. We take care of everybody else and then we just
Yeah.
like
It's
Like,
like
neglect
a doctor being the worst type
do
of
what I
patient
say,
too.
but not as I do type
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And so we talk about this with providers and different clinicians, that sometimes we have to take a step back, not sometimes, all the time. We have to take a step back and really take care of ourselves. And self-care is not just, going on a shopping spree or, doing a facial, even though that's lovely and I highly recommend it. You know, these are things that you're going to do every day. These are things that you're going to do to restore and re-energize yourself so that you can continue to function and not be burnt out at the end of the day or at the end of the week. So we have to implement the strategies that we teach to ourselves all the time
I love it.
and
Now,
have the boundaries.
I don't mean to pry, but you kind of mentioned that you're getting married soon, right? Natasha, do you ever find yourself kind of like analyzing your fiance, or like kind of
Kind of.
yeah,
Just kind of.
I'm curious. Like
I
I
feel
don't
like
live
it
with a
happens all the
clinical
time.
psychologist, so I'm just wondering, do you ever turn that off, or does your fiance benefit from your vast knowledge and years of experience?
I mean, yes, obviously.
Of course he does. Yeah,
Of
course
course he
does. Yeah.
benefits. I mean, duh, but it's hard to turn off. Like when you know something, you can't unknow it.
Yeah.
Right. So I know psychology, I know trauma, I know all these things. I can't unknow it. But I'm not going to be a therapist in my relationship. Right.
Okay.
So I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be Natasha. I'm going to still be a psychologist because I can't turn that
You
off.
can't
Like
turn that off. Yeah.
learn things. But I'm not going to be a therapist, right?
Yeah.
And so when things are going on that make no sense, or when he's having, you know, episodes or whatever, I'm not
Yeah.
going to be his therapist, but I'm going
Yeah.
to approach it in the same kindness, with the same compassion and empathy, and be like, what happened? What's going on?
Yeah.
Let's talk
What's
about this.
going on? Yeah.
Mhm.
Lay down on this couch real quick. Let me
Lay
just talk.
down and let me get my notepad.
Well, I have a parenting example, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's hear it. Go ahead.
So I think we can not unknow things, but we can know things and behave in the way that we know is not the way that we're
Oh
supposed
yeah,
to. Because,
absolutely.
yeah,
Okay.
so like, let's say I am trying to get my daughter to do homework and she doesn't want to do homework, right? Like with trauma-informed care, I am recognizing what is going on as she is amping up. I'm feeling my nervous system because we focus on the body. I'm feeling things kind of come up. And so there
Uh-huh.
is a thought in my head. There's a crossroads. I can use my psychologist knowledge and say, let's regulate and stay calm so
Mhm.
she doesn't get more upset and so we
Yeah.
don't go to the dark side. Or I can say, I know what's happening and I'm still gonna go to the dark
You're still gonna
side.
go.
Yeah.
We're
Oh
we're
yeah.
going 0 to 1,000. Let's
Yeah.
do this. Like
Yeah.
mama needs to get this out. Like let's
I,
do
Yeah.
it. You know?
yeah. And I choose both,
Yes.
like
All the
different time. Mhm.
I agree. I mean, I'm not patient, kind, compassionate all the time ever. It's like there are
Yeah.
days it's like, you know what? I don't have capacity, right? I don't have capacity to approach this in the way that I know I should, and then I
Mm-hmm.
don't. And then we repair it later and it's fine, right? Because that's what relationships are all about. And honestly, that's what
Human.
therapy is all about too.
Yeah.
You're not always going to get it right, and that's okay.
Yeah. I find this fascinating. Like I just, because I'm a marketing professional, right? And
Mhm.
I never turn my brain off. And I'm always thinking, even if it's past like normal working hours or whatever, like Chris can attest to this. I send him, text or Instagram messages or whatever. Like I'm always on it. And the one thing that I've tried to do is take Sundays for me. Like I claim Sundays
Yeah.
because I want to be able to just have a day where I don't worry about anything. Let me just have a day and be mindful and be in the moment with my family or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
so I just find it fascinating from other professionals how they do it. And especially with somebody like you guys that consumes or digests so much trauma from other people because they're coming to you to talk about it. How are you guys like filtering it out to make sure that you're okay? Where Natasha and Jessica are okay when
Mhm.
you go home and not worrying about Matt's problems at 9 o'clock at night,
Right.
that sort of thing. I've
Well,
just
and
always been fascinated with that.
another core principle of trauma-informed care is peer support. So, I mean, we have each other.
Yeah.
So we talk about
Mhm.
stuff, vent to each other, like be completely irrational and whatever with each other, about what we need to get out. But
Don't
I think
judge
that the
zone,
people,
right? You just don't judge me. I'm just gonna
So,
tell you what
yeah,
happened. And
it's like
yeah,
a unconditional positive regard, like
yeah,
whatever you come at me with, I'm here for it because I know what not very many people do
can
what we do.
understand and
Yeah.
relate.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we were on the phone for an hour last night,
Mhm.
Really?
venting, talking, prepping, like doing all the things. And making sure that
Just
we
for
were
the show, y'all were prepping for the show? Because if it was, then I'm just gonna get the butterfly. Like this is
well, we were talking about like things that we wanted to come up with today, but then we divulged into other stuff too. I like,
Yeah.
and I'm doing this and I'm doing this, and oh yeah, I'm getting married. Do you remember that thing?
You
Like,
remember that
remember that and how
trauma
people
event that's coming up? Yeah, like
that people are not RSVPing and it's driving me nuts, like all of that, right?
yeah. Did Matt send in his RSVP yet? I
No.
haven't, so I'm sorry, but
But we get to see people get better, and
I love
that's the
that.
thing, it's so much more like there's a sacrifice we make by having other people's trauma affect us, but the reward is like so much bigger. It's so
Yeah.
cool.
When
So
do you see that reward? Because it's different. It's different milestones for everybody. Like it would be different for me versus treating Chris, right? Like, how do you
Yeah.
know that you've crossed that threshold of, hey, Matt's gotten better since I've seen him these last 27 years? Like, like,
question right out of my mouth. I was
you
just
know,
about to ask that.
how do you establish those milestones?
Well, it's really different for everybody, right? So
Of
it's going to
course.
be really, really personal and really individualized. But for example, if a patient of mine has engaged in a type of behavior, right, in their relationship, right, every time that their partner gave them feedback, they lost it, right?
Yeah.
And that was like something that they were working towards, and they had this 1 week where they didn't lose it, that they were able to say, wait, I need a break. That's
Yeah.
a major win right there,
Yeah.
right?
I
So that
see.
was like an example. It's hard to
So
kind of
it's
give a blanket
Yeah, I mean,
response to.
no, that's beautiful. Yeah. It's just knowing your patient and knowing what you've worked on for all through the sessions.
Yeah.
And then when he or she gives you the feedback, then it's like, wow, you didn't go 0 to 1,000 and jump
Mhm.
off a bridge. You really kind of looked at it through a compassionate lens and tried to really understand where your partner was coming from. So
Right.
that's a win. I totally get it. Yeah, that's beautiful.
yeah, I heard I think his name Gabor Mate. Like I heard him talk about trauma as being almost like a wound that's healed over, and the scab is really hard. So
Uh-huh.
people who have trauma are very rigid and kind of don't take a lot of risks and don't have a lot of flexibility in how they behave because how they behaved kept them alive at some point. And so I think when we see any flexibility or risk taking, that's a win for me. When they try something they haven't done and it doesn't turn out catastrophically as they thought it would.
Yeah. Like the outcome is more traumatic in their head than when they really do it and they realize it wasn't so bad. Like, like yeah. I mean, I'm just gonna share this, it's probably irrelevant, but I have a fear of trying like different foods. Like I'm kind of set to my like, hey, if I'm in Italian, then I eat this. If I'm in, if we're eating Chinese and I eat this, like, like I don't go out and just say, hey, you know what, it's Wednesday, I want to go eat crickets. It's not one of those things, right? And so I guess that would be something for me if I ever was just like, hey, I'm gonna go and try something different. That would be like a little milestone for me. And
Yeah.
that's just, I know
That,
it's
that
irrelevant. I was just
no, I
sharing
mean it makes
stuff.
because we could like if we were in session, we could
Oh, we're not?
right.
Just kidding.
We could float back to figure out where that came from and we could butterfly hug that gone.
I can tell you where it came from. It came
So how
from
would you figure out where that came from? What
I,
would some steps be?
You kind of figure out what's the belief, the emotions, and the body sensations underlying that, and then
yeah.
it's called a float back. We float back, and your brain looks in its files and figures out what happened
I could
that matched those
yeah.
experiences
I
before.
can tell you right now, let's float
Okay.
back and I'll
Okay.
keep it brief because we're running out of time, but I can tell you it was a matter of resources. Like when I was growing up with my parents, it was me and my two siblings. There was 5 of us, right? My parents we didn't have a lot. We weren't poor, but we just didn't, and they didn't when they were growing up, they were really poor.
Mhm.
And so it was a matter of just resources. So it was kind of like we never ventured out. We didn't really eat out. It was special if we ate out. And the rest of the days of the week, it was kind of like the same type of, meal or food or whatever. Like my mom had special in like her dishes, and that's what it was. We just never was like, hey, it's Wednesday, let's go eat,
Crickets.
Indian food or crickets or something like that.
Yeah, so that's
It
an
was the lack of
example.
resources.
Yeah, you kind of started out being like, well, what's wrong with me? I only eat this one thing, but we just figured out what happened to you.
Yeah.
So that's, and
I
I
just
think it's
wasn't exposed to it.
right.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure we get this in because Natasha knows I always have to get this in.
Let's get
That
it in.
things like poverty, discrimination, racism, homophobia, transphobia, sexism are all considered trauma. And so those impact people globally. And so we
Yeah.
always take into account gender,
Where
history,
you
culture.
grew up, who you grew
Yeah.
up around.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
That's in, my grandparents grew up during obviously segregation, right?
Mhm.
Or they were in, and my parents did too. But where I lived, it was, my high school was like, it was majority black, and I
Mhm.
played basketball. So I was subject to like, hey, I'm part of a team. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl, you're black or white, whatever. Like the goal is to beat the other team. So
Mhm.
I kind of, I never had that, like, that thought of, hey, we're different, like you should go over there and I should eat over here, or that. It was just always like, I don't see color, I just see people for who they are, and so I don't know, I'm sharing too much on this episode. I'm really enjoying this treatment, right? Thank you so much. But
Good. Yeah.
um
So should
yeah.
we tell you guys a little bit about the butterfly hug so you know what
Yes,
you're
please.
doing?
Yes, before we go, tell us what it is, because I've been doing it all episode.
So I'll tell you a little bit about it and then we'll do a demo. So the butterfly hug comes from a trauma therapy called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is part of what Dr. George was doing with the float back there, right? And so the premises of it is that when we are engaging both sides of our brain using, whether it's tapping, eye movement, or butterfly hugs, that we are able to stay in the present moment and also regulate our nervous system,
Okay.
right? And so the key point of it, if you're ever going to do butterfly hugs, is to always remember to do it alternating, right? So we're not doing this, we're alternating left and right. And you can go as fast as you want, as slow as you want, whatever feels good to you. But this is kind of a way for you to regulate your nervous system, to kind of calm down a little bit. Whew, take a breath, sigh,
Yeah.
and just feel a little bit better.
Yeah. So
It's interesting.
Birdman
I've
from
never heard of
Cash
that
Money
before.
Millionaires was onto something, like, I don't know if you listen to rap music, but he was like, caw, caw, like, anyways, I'm just kidding.
Completely different.
I
So
don't know.
anyway, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But I love that. This is, yeah.
Mhm.
So if I ever get into an argument with my wife in the near future, probably soon, but I'll just,
Tomorrow during Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
tomorrow during Thanksgiving, when I mess up the gravy, right? She's gonna be yelling at me, and I'm just gonna be like,
People will need this tomorrow when they're around their families.
yeah.
Oh yes.
Well, that's a
100%.
great trick. That I love that. Or I wouldn't say trick, I would say tool. That is a really cool tool, and I'm glad that you guys shared that with us on the podcast. So before we leave, let's plug the practice again. How can people find you? Is there a website? Like, let's try and get you some phone calls.
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is TellaPsychology.com, TELLA psychology.com.
Okay.
You can book initial consults on our website and get connected with us through email, phone, whatever. We try to be as accessible as possible. And and help people out. I mean, we don't just treat trauma. That is our specialty. That's
obviously,
what we've
yeah.
dedicated our career to. But we also treat depression, anxiety, relationship issues, life
Okay.
transitions, you name it.
Is it private pay or y'all take insurance as well?
It's private pay. We do not take
Okay.
insurance. Mhm.
Okay, fantastic. Just trying to let
You can
everybody
also
know.
find them in the
So
magazine. You can also find them in the magazine.
you can find them in the magazine. Yep, yep.
Yeah,
Shout
and
out.
all
And
of
on
us are
Psychology
on
Today.
Psychology Today. Yeah.
I love it. Well, ladies, y'all are welcome back anytime you want, and maybe next week for our little hour session again. So I'm kidding.
We're gonna have to start charging.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but
Matt pays.
I enjoyed this episode so much. I enjoyed you guys' presence. I wish you all the health and success that's coming to you that you both deserve. And Natasha, we wish you all the best in your traumatic event coming up in December.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. But it's been a blessing to have you guys on the show this week, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you both. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
And it wasn't so bad, right?
No, it's awesome. I could do it.
Not
I
at
could
all.
do another
Let's
hour.
do it. Let's do it next week for an hour. Let's do it. I'm kidding. All right, Chris, you got anything left before we get out of here?
No, we're good.
Fantastic. Till
We'll
next
see
week,
everyone
Mind
next week.
Splitters. We'll see you soon.